Good afternoon, and welcome to the Embedded Executive Podcast. My name is Rich Nass. I am the Executive Vice President of Open Systems Media. I lead the content team for embedded computing design. This week on the podcast, we have Robert Moran. He is the General Manager and Vice President of Automotive Processors for NXP. How you doing, Robert?
I'm doing very well, Rich. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining us. So we want to talk about automotive processors, and I think the direction we're going to go into is ECU consolidation.
Yeah.
However, I feel like we're on this forever swinging pendulum. Do we consolidate? Do we keep everything discrete? Do we consolidate everything into one MCU, or do we put these things all around the vehicle? So I feel like over the last 2 years or so, we're moving back to consolidation. Do you feel the same way? And or is there a tipping point coming soon, or we're going to go back the other way?
No, I definitely think we're moving in a direction of consolidation. I think if you really look at some of the challenges that OEM face and the opportunities that are in front of them as well, in terms of how they can transform the user experience, both with software-driven features and with AI, and also the challenges they face in terms of, you know, cost efficiency and scalability in terms of the complexity, which ultimately drives time to market and cost. I think when you look at those two things, there really is only one answer, and that to me is start to centralize software, make your vehicle features really centered around software-driven platforms. And the way to do that, to free up the cost to get there as well, is by consolidating fundamentally. So I definitely think we're now at this point where consolidation is happening. We see this across the globe, and I think it will start to accelerate the more and more software and AI start to have a bigger play in the software-defined vehicle.
I asked this similar question to a lot of people, and I don't know if anybody's ever brought up the software side as the reason for doing this. That's really interesting. And that puts it in a whole different perspective. Is that something that's relatively new to NXP, or is that a strategy you've been working on for a while?
No, it's a strategy we have been working on for a while. I think what we see in existing vehicles, when you have a lot of these discrete ECUs and discrete components, there's a lot of software in there today, right? So it's not that there isn't software within the vehicle, but it's very much localized to specific applications. The data is trapped there. And when you start to look at some, simple features of having a camera sensor being used for some in-cabin monitoring in conjunction with a sensor in the seat, for example, when you try to put these software features together and you have three discrete ECUs doing this, it can drive a lot of complexity in terms of talking to tier ones and getting software features changed in specific ECUs. And there's a lot of complexity actually in trying to innovate quickly with this distributed and discrete ECU architecture that's in place today. So we very much see this kind of centralization of software being a big enabler for new innovation. The ability, similar to in your smartphone, to have an idea, I can use these sensors in a very creative way, and I very quickly want to iterate and bring something to market. We see the OEMs, particularly in China, really having that same mindset. And the only way they get there is by trying to centralize their software platforms to reduce the complexity and therefore the cost and the time to market of doing that.
So with all that said, how much of a believer are you in open source?
Oh, great question. So I think open source really helps accelerate the innovation cycle, but a car is still a car, right? And functional safety is still super critical. And that's something from NXP's side that we, have a lot of history in, and we think a lot about in terms of how we both enable our hardware and the software ecosystem around our hardware as well. So at a certain point in time, particularly for safety relevant systems, There needs to come that tipping point between how much can you really rely on open source, how qualified is it to the highest levels of safety integrity. And I think today we see open source being great in terms of things like connectivity, some of the user experience, but really when it comes to the more safety critical aspects of the vehicle, very much still looking more to the commercial offerings that are out there that are very specifically tailored around functional safety in real time.
So we're headed down the path of safety and risk and that sort of stuff. You brought up AI before. How concerned are you with delivering AI solutions to your customers? Because it's still somewhat of a
Yeah.
scary frontier out there.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And I think there's still a lot of unknowns in terms of what that means in automotive. So, whilst I think the value of AI through the likes of ChatGPT, we can start to imagine how it's changing a lot of the user experience that we have. There's a lot of potential and value in terms of how it can shape the speed at which we actually deliver software into a vehicle, for example. But again, we're in safe control systems. Real time is important. You cannot afford to make mistakes here. So it's really at this point in time where I think we'll see it certainly accelerate in the user experience. I think in ADAS, it's already been used for the self-driving systems today. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for it to go even further into the vehicle, into sensors and actuators, and the data that is hidden much more within the core of the vehicle. But it needs to be done with the right guardrails. It needs to be done with the right safety monitoring around this. And again, from NXP, when we look at AI and how we bring AI to the market, it's very much looking at it in that context of, okay, this can drive a lot of innovation. We've got great access to data that wasn't available before, but how do we make it safe and how do we make it power efficient as well?
Would you have given the same answer if you were sitting on the other side of the table and you were your customer?
What I've got a great question. Yeah, I think it would, right? So if I'm buying the car, then I still see the car as a large object that needs to have a lot of um, safety considerations around it ultimately, right? So from a user experience perspective, I certainly see that as the short-term value where AI can immediately come to life in the car. But I think the longer-term value is, very much at the start of that wave of the smartphone where, it was hard to imagine all the use cases that would emerge over time. I think we'll see AI come more and more embedded and integrated into other parts of the car that we haven't yet quite imagined. I think the personalization is a huge opportunity where the car can adapt more and more around you and learn more around you. But again, this balance between the user experience and then the control systems and the safety needs to be carefully managed.
Something you said made a light bulb go off for me that it's still a car. And I use this as my example. I'm holding up my
Yeah.
smartphone, and this is a computer data device. Oh, yeah, and it makes phone calls too.
Yeah.
Are we going to get to the point where it's this moving office or entertainment thing? And oh, yeah, it also takes you from point A to point B.
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly is a possibility, and it's particularly when we look at things like autonomous driving, and we've been up and down in terms of hype curves around how quickly we can get to level 4, level 5 in the past, right? We thought it was going to be much quicker. There's been a bit of a reality check. But clearly, there are companies out there today demonstrating, kind of very highly capable autonomous systems. So I think inevitably, yes, absolutely. And if you kind of then think about that in context of what it means for the underlying electronics and the platforms that you need to build around this, um, you can somewhat look at it as you still have this vehicle underneath whatever you put on top of it in terms of that user experience, which can be hugely immersive. And it's not necessarily about driving, but it's about mobility. But you still need this platform that is moving you from A to B, doing it in a safe way, as it becomes more autonomous, I think cybersecurity becomes even more of a consideration, where the potential implications are much wider. So you look at that vehicle platform, and again, it has to have all of these things that still are very, maybe a little bit not as exciting as the user experience, but still super critical to ensuring the safety of your passengers from point A to point B.
Okay, so this is crystal ball time for you.
Yeah.
Would a person who's born in 2025 ever obtain a traditional driver's license?
Born in 2025, so they're getting to
So
2040.
16, 17 years from now, will they have a traditional driver's license, or will they just hop into an autonomous vehicle and never have the need for a driver's license?
Oh, that's a great question. It is, I can only ever be wrong. I'm going to say I think there's a
And I'm
very
going to hold you to this because you're coming back in 17 years.
yeah. We've had very similar discussions in the past with different colleagues as well, exactly around this topic. I think by the time we get to 2040, honestly, it's not a crazy scenario to imagine at that point in time. I would say I don't think it's again, with all good engineering problems, the last 10%, the last 5% is the hardest to solve. And yeah, I don't think we're going to solve that in the next year or two, but yeah, 15 years time, honestly, it's not crazy. So I'd say if I was to be a betting man, I'd say, yeah, I think there's a very good likelihood that they won't need a driver's license.
Very good. Thank you very much, Robert. This has been awesome.
Great. No, thank you again. Appreciate the conversation.
That was Robert Moran. He is the General Manager and Vice President for Automotive Processors for NXP, and I am Rich Nass with Open Systems Media.